Is Fergie really finally clearing off? As ever, let me explain. Hi, nice to see you, chums. Thank you so much for joining me today on this ever-evolving soap opera that is, of course, what's happening over at Royal Lodge. Now, as I've often said, the thing for me is this is a very nice distraction, isn't it? Because the bigger story is about, of course, the terrible situation for all those poor young ladies, and that's the story. But of course, what happens is, and I've mentioned this before, but there are some pivotal people in that story that have yet to emerge, and I truly wish that they would come out, simply because this would pale into insignificance with what many others are alleged to have done. You understand, the story's far bigger. And while we're at the start of this, sorry, we'll have a lovely wave, nice to see you. And while we're at the start of this, can I just clear this up as well? Because this is important, this is what I love about our friendship group, our channel. I'm able to tell you the true stories that go on behind the scenes. And the thing that I can't stand is when people, when people are down, they just pile it on even more without any factual base evidence. And the problem is, as you know, Sarah Ferguson going through a very difficult time, mostly brought on by herself, and now you've got the mainstream media who can sniff, headlines and all that sort of stuff. And so consequently, what we saw recently over the last few weeks are charities dropping Sarah. Many have got no idea that she was even associated with, I'm sure you'll agree. And then consequently, the stories ramp up, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, a new story that's come out, and I mentioned this briefly, was the fact that, of course, ITV have now dumped Sarah Ferguson from their leading daytime programmes. Things like, Good Morning Britain, who's watching that anyway, Loose Women, and This Morning, and of course all those other little bits of paraphernalia. Two things there, let me tell you. The story is that, they've now dumped her, they're not going to have any association. Sarah, in fairness, and this is the thing that I like to be clear about, she never had a contract with ITV. So you can't dump somebody if they're just a freelancer. They decided between both parties as and when Sarah was going to appear. So if she was going on Loose Women, it might be to promote her book, or Good Morning Britain, maybe a charitable endeavour, or This Morning, they were testing her out, as I told you, as a potential agony aunt. And simply, they could not afford Sarah's fee. That was the story. So for ITV to, spin this story that, oh, we've dumped Sarah Ferguson, we're not going to work with her anymore. If Sarah Ferguson was offering to give them an exclusive interview, very similar into the vein of like Prince Harry when he sat down last year with, the farcical thing taking on the press, and then backed down very quickly and just took the money from the court and said, okay, back off, that sort of thing. If she was willing to do that, then ITV, without a shadow of a doubt, will be running towards Sarah Ferguson's door. There was no contract, there is no contract, she was merely booked as and when required. The only outline deal that could have gone her way was a potential thing with This Morning. But as I said, they didn't have the books behind, to carry on that deal. So as I say, I like to be fair because that's just unkind and simply not true. And it's interesting also with ITV, they managed to put this story out when they get blasted for having an all-black female panel on the soon-to-be defunct Loose Women, with none of them wearing a poppy, right? So, stones and all of that sort of stuff, chums, you get the picture. And this is after, of course, the MP for Reform, Sarah, for Runcorn, well, basically she got blasted for saying there are too many not mixed enough, but simply black people in TV ads. And the bottom line is, the day after you've got that, what about the woman who ended up in the Boots ad saying at the coronation it's terribly white, the balcony? No kicking off there, is there? You see how this works. Now, Sarah, it's a tricky time, as you can imagine, because over at Royal Lodge, it's getting worse by the day. Everybody knows their time is numbered, right? I mean, Prince Andrew, whether he wants to admit it or not, and his cast iron agreement, and he's got this and he's got that, it doesn't really matter. It's public perception, and public perception is that he's now a social pariah and people don't necessarily want to be mixed with him. Now, I don't know, because as I said, the former royal has refuted all claims and all allegations. And what he has done is made an absolute hash of the interview, for instance, with, Newsnight and all of that. If it had been a bit more clear and a bit more clarity, things might not be in the mess they're in. But I've been told that behind the scenes, Sarah Ferguson is, she knows it. this is it. She knows that they've got to move. So she is now already packing her bags behind the scenes. Now, recently, one of her sisters came over from Australia to lend support. And this is because, obviously, whether you agree with what's gone on, the emails and everything behind all of this facade are human beings. And they know they've done wrong in the fullness of time, right? They know that, but they still have to function. They need support. And let's not forget that Sarah herself had her own cancer battle. So I do look at people, with a bigger picture. But according to an excellent source on site at Windsor, Sarah herself feels that maybe this is a good thing, a good thing out of a bad, a chance to move on, maybe look at a new direction of her life. Now, the rumours go, of course, that she may now, for an in sort of interim period at least, go over and stay with one of her daughters, perhaps over in Portugal, or indeed spend a considerable amount of time over in Australia. Now, where does this leave Prince Andrew? Because you see, the bottom line is they've been very much unified together in this. But now, because of Andrew's stubbornness and not willing to want to see the bigger picture and to move in the direction that even she believes now it's time to go in, well, you've got a problem. Sarah knows that, and consequently, I think, from what I've been told, is more upset at the fact that, she tried very hard to get herself back in to being liked and at least welcomed back into the monarchy, the Christmas things, the tennis invites. And I think that's probably what's weighing on her mind more. And I'm not taking sides, and I'm not, but you understand, I think she's probably thought, you know what, this was all going so well, and something from the past has come out, and that's that. Now, apparently, according to the source, in the fullness of time, she will explain her version of events. So I'm alluding to the fact that I believe Sarah Ferguson probably, in my opinion, if she goes to Australia, will do an interview out there, something like 60 minutes, of which she's previously done before. And this would then put her in a very sort of more firmer story, as it were, to say, well, this was my take of events. Now, behind the scenes, it looks like Sarah and Andrew are, going down a different path. The two daughters of these two people are very much concerned about their mother and father, as any child would be, because they know this is very difficult. But they're falling apart simply because, they can't agree on what to do. Andrew believes that the way forward is to stick it out at Windsor, and to stick it out whether it be remaining in Royal Lodge or indeed taking a smaller property, but the unity of the family should remain. Andrew's argument is still the fact that he wants to be on site simply because he wants to be near his daughters and his grandchildren. But as we know, they mainly live in various parts of the world anyway, so that really wouldn't necessarily matter. As I've pointed out, and despite what you're reading in the press, Prince William just does not want them on Windsor grounds. He just feels that this is going to be antagonistic, not just for the monarchy, but for the, all of the sort of paraphernalia around them. The hard bit, of course, for William, of course, is that, Catherine herself, according to an excellent source, is having, good and bad days, because there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of negativity. And this is behind the fact that, well, what we saw the other day with His Majesty the King when he was out in Lichfield, as you saw, there was one lone heckler screaming about what's going on with your brother, etc. Catherine and William experienced that before, remember, after being called racists by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, of which they refute as well. But they, William was called, is the royal family a racist family? Remember that. So consequently, Catherine knows that when she goes out, she could be met with the same. And that obviously creates tension, because you just want to do the job that you're there to do, right? That is your bigger story. But right now, between the two scenes, the problem is literally Fergie ready to go, bags packed, Andrew begging to stay, saying, look, we can ride this out together as a family. But circling behind them is, of course, the court of William and Catherine, who say, in very nice terms, this possibly will be the right time to make a move into a different direction. As I often say here on the show, chums, it's still going on. And I'd love to know, if you were in William and Catherine's shoes, what would you do? And more importantly, is Fergie right to say, maybe the time has now come to say, fresh start? Do let me know, be respectful as ever, and if you can, like and share. Neil Shawn, Kensington, London.